Hi guys, welcome back to another tutorial video. Today I'm going to be doing Nagash, Supreme Lord of the Undead. Now I've done this video slightly different, so I've decided to do a voiceover this time because I just got completely confused in what I was saying last time while I was painting. So it just, well, I lost track of what I was saying half the time. So this model was actually taking me absolutely ages to do. One of the main reasons being I actually had to start again. So I got halfway through painting it only to realise I didn't press record. So that was fun. So I had to respray it and start again. So with this one, I have been suggested by Benjamin Wilson on YouTube to do like a black and grey to it. So I'm going to try my very best to, well, I tried my very best to input that onto it. As normal, I'm going to be using a wet palette. That just helps with coverage and you can get a nice smooth coat with that. So there you go, the Abaddon Black is going to be the first one that we use, which is going to be on the bottom cloak. Well, I'm going to start on the bottom cloak. So add some water to that. Make sure it's nice and, well, not too diluted, because as mentioned in my previous video, you don't want to dilute it too much because it can just take a lot longer to dry. As normal, with every time I'm painting, I always do that whole pinchy thing with my hand. That does help get it into a nice point instead of having to use your mouth for that, because so many times I've done that while I've got Nuln Oil on the brush and it just tastes horrible. So with this one, I'm going to start, well, you don't need to be too neat, but I'm going to start from pretty much the belt down. I'm going to leave the bottoms jagged, so I'm not going to cover the entire cloak because that's where it goes into the spirit hosts. But so I'm going to work my way down. I'm going to start with a black, like solid black up the top, and then just leave it sort of jagged about a quarter of the way down. So you'll see that soon as I go through it and turn the model. Now I did think, well, part of the way through painting this, that I probably should have painted it before it was fully assembled, because this one, trying to get behind everything, was so tricky. It's sometimes with the bigger models you might want to consider painting in sections, so it just makes it that bit easier. Because you can see I'm struggling a bit there to get beyond the spirit house. Again, as normal, you haven't got to be too neat with this, especially being the starting colour. And pretty much just slapping this on now. Making sure I'm getting in all the holes that are on the cape. You'll notice on this tutorial that the background changes quite a bit. The reason for that is this one did take a few days to do. And obviously trying to get all the video editing right and actually pressing record. Well, pressing record does make a difference when you're trying to upload videos. So if I move my hand out of the way, which I doubt I do, you'll see that I'm doing all of the jaggedness. I am just being really rough with it. Yeah, so you can see. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to add a grey on next a bit further down. And then when you add the technical coat over the top, it sort of blends in. And it gives that nice sort of effect where it goes from dark to lighter colour. Now, obviously, because it would have taken way too long to just record and show the whole lot, I've skipped forward. So now I've done the top of the bottom cape and all of the armour. So the armour, obviously, I'm going to be doing with a dry coat, like a dry paint later on, just to give it that bit of a shine to it. But I've done the shoulder pads, chest plate, and part of the crown. Now I've left half of the crown on it because it does have bones on it, and I am going to do them like a bone colour. If that adds to it, adds a nice effect to it. You'll have to excuse the side facing half of this video as well, and the tape on my glasses, because my daughter decided she wanted to go on my glasses. So I had to sellotape them back together just so I could see, so I can paint. But it's all fun and games, I suppose. There you go, look at the lovely bit of tape work on that. I think I've done a pretty good job of a temporary fix. So, trying to get through all these bones, I did start out trying to get it really neat, but I just realised with the brush I was using, that's a no-go. So again, ain't got to be super neat then. Got to be going over that with like a bone colour later on anyway. Again, add another bit of a skip forward because that was just going to take way too long. But I've also done the bottom of the staff black because I want that to look sort of metal. And like, I've done all the hands, left all the jagged edges like that. So I think this was a point where I was done with the black now. There you go, just give it a nice little spin just so you can see it all. I ended up doing the black quite late on in the night anyway, so I ended up having to leave that and go on to, or wait until the next day. Reason being, I was absolutely knackered. So, what I'm going to be doing next is I'm going to be going over all of the parts that I want to be metal with the, there you go, Necron Compound. But this stuff I absolutely love using, so it just gives a nice metallic look to it. And I'm going to be using a medium, when my hand can, there you go, medium dry brush. The reason I use a medium for this, I know it's quite a large model, but it is quite intricate as well, so I don't want to be covering everything with the Necron Compound. Same as normal, whenever you're dry brushing, add a bit to your brush and then pretty much brush as much of it as you can off. Wait until there's hardly any left on the brush, because otherwise you'll end up getting a very bright colour that you don't want. All you really want to do is highlight. So I'll start off with the hands. I don't know if you can see it in that light. So start off with that. And then move on to the leg pieces, leg armour. A lot of people would wait to do a dry brushing at the end, but where I pretty much slap it on, I end up going over onto the other parts. So I've done all the black, I'm going to be doing a dry brush on that now, so then it ain't going to matter too much. There you go, so you can see it's got a bit of a shine to it. As you can see, I did just headbutt the camera then, because I ended up putting it in a really awkward position, which was pretty much in front of my face, so it just makes it that bit awkward. So when I was doing this painting session, I actually had to be at a lean, which is awkward. So, word of advice, if you're going to do any recording while you're painting, make sure the camera's in a decent position first that you're not going to hit. Because you'll notice a couple of times in this video I headbutt it. And now skipped ahead. The last bit I'm going to be doing with the Necron Compound is the crown itself. So just going to be adding a small amount to that. Again, trying to get through all these bones on the back or whatever they are it was a pain. So next time I think I'm just gonna assemble it in sections and then paint and then finish it off by putting it all together. So I think that is it for the dry brushing on that. As you can see, I have gone over, but that doesn't matter so much because we are going to be going over them. Yeah, as you can see, I've gone to grab the red cup, thinking, you know what, I'm going to have a swig, realising it's the paint water. So to try and prove a point, I just held the cup at the camera and cleaned the brush. Not something I normally do, but I was just trying to prove a point. You might notice I've got a little helper in the background. Like I've just got them building my models for my army. I've just got a few little bits that needed building still, so they're just sticking them together for me. So I did try to get them out of camera shot, but they won't listen. Claim to fame and everything. So the next part I went on to after the black was the bone areas with the Wraithbone. There you go. Get that close up to the camera. Get rid of that. And go back onto my wet palette. Now, you'll notice all I've got is a plate covered in cling film. That does change later on in the video, but it's just quick and easy, and it works. So, and I don't mess up my plate either, which is a bonus. Now with this I am actually using a base brush, so it's smaller than the previous brush I was using for the black. So, only because obviously the bone areas are a lot smaller. So, as always, wet palette again. Make sure that's diluted enough. If you do end up making it a bit too diluted, it doesn't matter, just add a bit more paint to it just to try and thicken it up a bit. Just make sure that's alright. Do the whole handy pinchy. Sounds a bit weird, but I like it. There we go, I'll start with the main belt bit hanging down. So when all the bone bits are done, personally I think it looks really good, like with the colour, but it is going to be darkened down a bit later on. Going over the bone areas as well, you want to be careful that you don't actually hit any of the black this time. So, wouldn't be a problem if you did, you can just go over it again, that wouldn't be a problem, but you'll find if you're being sloppy with it, you're just going to end up having to keep coating over each and everything again. Now another skip forward and a side face with broken glasses. I'd near enough finished all of the bone areas now, so I'd done the spines on the back, the part of the staff, shoulder pads, knee pads and the belt. So all the things that I wanted to have the bone effect. So I've even done part of the sword, like the handle on it, because that is bone as well. Clean the brush. Now I'm going to be going back to the cape bit on the bottom. So I'm going to be going from the black, and I'm going to be doing like a grey. So fade the black into the grey. A slightly, as you can see, a slightly bigger brush for this one. So I don't actually have a grey, so I ended up having to improvise and make my own. So I use the Corax White and Abaddon Black. With that, I can just get the sort of grey that I want as well, so this makes it a bit easier. As you can see with what I just did, getting the paints out, sometimes with the paints they are quite easy to just get drops off the lid. Sometimes you can, like, be careful not to drop it, but that's how I get a lot of my paints out anyway. So just so I know it's like per drop, so I can either do like a 50-50 or that sort of mixture. Make sure I get all that mixed together properly. Yeah, so once it's mixed together, as you can see I wanted it a bit lighter, so add a bit more white to it. Just wanted it to come out a bit. And as you can see, that's come out as quite a nice grey. So just water that down a bit. I probably would recommend getting a grey, but because I didn't have one at the time, I just had to improvise. Now, when I had the grey on, I do kind of overlap the black that I've already done. I do as well do the same thing again and leave jagged edges at the bottom, just so then it gives like a nice fade into the technical that I'm going to be adding on later. So it does look like a bit of a difference. As you can see, it goes from black to grey with no fade whatsoever, but that does change later on in the video. As you can see, when I'm working on the larger areas, I ain't neat about it. Don't beat around the bush. Yeah, so that's most of the base, or halfway down the cape, done now. So I mean, doing the voiceover for this is so much easier than actually talking while painting. So I can see what I'm doing as I'm doing it, instead of focusing, biting my tongue, trying not to breathe too heavy on the model. So as you can see, I'm doing the jagged edges on top and bottom of this one. So now the grey's done on that one. The part that you start on with the grey, by the time you get round to the other side, the start of it's already dried anyway, so you ain't got to worry about leaving it. So now I'm going to be moving on to the technical paint. So it's going to be the same one I used in the previous video, which I just love the absolute look of it, because it just gives it that ghostly look to it. I give it a shake, and it is the, oh there you go, the Nihilakh Oxide. When it focuses, there you go, Nihilakh Oxide again, and from the top of the cape down, so from the belt down, including the black and the grey, I'm just going to slap this on all the way down, like to cover the spirit host as well. And when that dries, it'll give a nice ghostly effect to it. So it doesn't matter where you start, as long as you get a nice even coat over the entire bottom. But as you can see as well, on his arms he's got sort of like a cape hanging down slightly. I'm going to be adding the Nihilakh Oxide to that as well. The bits that are unpainted around the area, you haven't actually got to be too careful about. So just making sure you're covering the entire spirit area. So it does look a bit dark at the moment, but that's no thanks to the light. There you go. So you can see it does slightly fade from the top of the cape down. This bit was very time consuming. Where there's obviously so many wispy bits on it, it was just trying to get around each side of it, making sure I haven't missed any of it. It was a nightmare. Making sure it's completely covered. There you go, so as you can see, the spirit hosts are completely covered now, and I'm going on to the cape bits on the arms, doing the same thing, just so you get a nice fade. Now I did have to do it off camera, but one of the sides of the capes I did actually miss, so I ended up having to do that off camera before going on to the next part. As I'm doing, you can do exactly the same thing. So I'm just going around, touching up anywhere that I've missed, or where I think it could have a bit more of the technical on it. So I think at this point I was actually relatively happy with it. All but the underside of that, clearly. now. So as you can see, you get a nice fade going from the black into the dark green into the lighter green. So I think that's turned out quite nice, the bottom part of it. I'll just add a few highlights later on near the end of the video. But all aside, that bottom part's near enough done. There you go, as you can see, another day. I say another day, it was just that same evening, just needed a break, something to eat. So as you can see, I've upgraded my wet palette. I'm now going on to the Retributor Armour, which gives a nice bright gold. I'm going to be using that on things like the scepter and parts of the crown, things like that. As you can see, the wet palette is looking much better now, instead of it being a plate with some cling film around it. So I do need to be careful because my paint water does start to look a bit like orange. So I'll be starting at the top of the scepter and the crown. So this one I am using a detailed brush for because it is a very small area that I'm trying to paint. If you do go over, it doesn't matter so much because, as I always say, you can always go back and cover it up. That's not too much of a problem, but just try and be as careful as you can when doing this part. There you go, so that's the crown done now. Just doing the scepter, or finishing off the scepter on this part. So you can see on one of the shoulder pads as well that I decided to change my mind. I didn't want that to be all bone, so I done around the edge gold. And same again with the bottom of the scepter, I didn't want that black anymore. So I decided to change things up a bit. Done all the headbands on the skulls on the belt, the ends of these shoes. So the good thing about this is you can do it however you want. So as you're going along, if you decide you want to change the colour on something, go for it. You can only make it look better, I suppose, or to your liking. So the sheath in the back, I also paint that a bit gold. Yeah, and the bottom of the scepter. Yeah, so that's all the gold areas done now that I want gold. So, as I said, got a scepter, crown, shoulder pad, belt, feet, things like that. Just little odds and sods that I wanted gold. It's looking pretty good so far. So wash the brush because I am going to be using the detail brush again. So for the same paint next time around. The next part I'll move on to is the bottom part, the top of the scepter with the Khorne Red. So I'm going to be doing, well, I say the bottom part, the top of the scepter, it's like the flag looking bit at the bottom. I'm also going to be doing his, I think it's his hair that's hanging out the front. So I'm going to be doing that red as well, just to make something stand out on the model once it's all shaded properly. As you might be able to see, I've got my little helper in the background again. This time they're doing a bit of painting for me. Doing a bit of teaching as I'm going along making this video. So yeah, start off with the bottom, that part, so it's like the red flag bit. And I'm going to be darkening that down a bit so it doesn't look too new, especially coming from a dead guy. Yeah, yes, I've also done what I believe to be the hair coming out. I could be wrong, but if I am, feel free to let me know in the comments. Making sure that's all covered around the back. Yeah, so as you can see, you've got the faded part at the bottom, as we went through earlier. It's turned out quite nice. And then you've got the red and gold up top. So it is quite a big model, so it's harder to get in the camera completely. Yeah. There you go, so that's that part done with the red now. Yeah, I don't have a drinking problem, I just enjoy a good drink. If ever you want to know what I'm drinking, by the way, please let me know in the comments and I'll be sure to put it on there. The next colour is the Bugman's Glow that I'm going to be adding on, and that is just going to be for all of the parts that look a bit like they would be made out of skin. So the sheath on his back, that looks like it would be made of like old skin, old burnt skin. Same as a couple of the books on the Spirit Host. Again, using a technical brush for this. Just don't want to ruin all the pretty painting that you've done earlier. Just go over it as careful as you can. Trying to get around all sides. Yeah, so I've done some of the books on the Spirit Host, as you can see. The back of the book that he's holding. And just going through, making sure that it's all completely covered around like the sheath and things like that. And that is all we need for the Bugman's glow. So you don't need much of that one. Only needed it on, as I said earlier, the things that would look like burnt flesh. As you can see, I've had another change of scenery. I've actually got a desk, which is much easier to work on than that little countertop. So there you go, the Zandri Dust I'm going to be using on all of the pages for the books. So just to give it that old look effect. It might come out a bit bright at first, but just I'll be going over that with some Nuln Oil later on. Just to darken them down, same as I will be for most of the actual miniature. There'll be a lot of Nuln Oil going on it. Yeah, so once I move the miniature out of the way, you'll be able to see the page difference on all of the books. Yeah, so it's only a small amount. Don't need too much. Just making sure that I've covered around each edge of the book. That doesn't look odd. There you go, so that's all of the pages basically done now. Just going through doing a few touch-ups on it. I'd always recommend double checking your work as you're going along, because you don't want to get most of the way through it if not finished and then realise you've either missed a bit or gone over, so it's better to be sure as you go around it. There you go, as you can see I've missed a bit there. So the next part, I've grabbed quite a large layer brush, or a shading brush, sorry, that is a bit different. So, and I'm going to be moving on to the Nuln Oil. So as I mentioned a moment ago, it's going to be covering most of the miniature. So I'm going to pretty much be doing all of it other than the spirit host and the bottom of the cape, like the bottom cape. So just go over the bone and the armour. So the highlights that have already been done by dry brushing will show through. So as you can see, it doesn't hide it completely, just dulls it down slightly. So there you go, literally just gone over absolutely everything, all the armour, all the bones, so you can see now it's darkened it all down a bit. It doesn't look too new. So with that part done, I think that was everything for the Nuln Oil that I'd used. So with the, well, we're going to be going back to a smaller technical brush, even though I'm going to be moving on to another shade. So, but this one's going to be like a red, so everywhere where the stitches are on the miniature, or what would look like stitches are on the stomach and on the back of some of the books, I use like a different red for it, so it's like a red shade. So there you go, so pretty much using a small detail brush, using the Carroburg Crimson. So this is the first time I am using this colour, or this shade, so fingers crossed all goes well. So yeah, going through with this, I think it has turned out quite well. So, as you can see on the stomach area, it's got like a slightly red colour. It looks a bit more red on camera, but you can see it. Just go over the hair as well to darken that down. The final bit before going on to actually doing the base is I'm just going to add a few little highlights on, so make them stand out a bit more, like the ghosts coming out of the book that he's holding. I thought as I was painting that it looked a bit too green, so I'm just going to use the Ulthuan Grey, and same as what I did in the previous video, treat this as a dry paint. So a small amount on a brush, make sure most of it's off. So try and get a decent angle so you can see it was quite awkward. So, but as you can see, it literally just highlights the very top, like the face that's coming out of the book. Now, I added a few highlights on like bits of the gold and some areas of the armour as well, what I thought would stand out a bit more. So the gold on the belt, around the shoulder pads, things like that. So that is basically it for painting Nagash. So I'm going to be going on to basing it shortly, and I'm going to be using a completely different, well, something I've never used before. So I'm just going to go fingers crossed and hope for the best. So if anyone has any techniques on how to use this in a better way after watching this video, please leave in the comments below, and I'll definitely work on that. Yeah, so I use the Astrogranite, which is again going to be a first. Now, using this, I assumed it was very similar to how I use the Armageddon Dust in a previous video, and just pretty much slap it on, push it around, things like that. But this time I'm using a spatula because it does seem quite a bit thicker. Literally just dumping it on, not too much because I don't want it to dry as I'm doing it, but enough to get some decent coverage on the base. Make sure I switch over to the smaller side. As you can see, I'll start using the big one first to get the main parts spread out. So I am now going to skip past this because I'm going to do a separate video later on basing miniatures, because seeing as this is the first time I'm using this one, it could take me a while to do. And that is Nagash complete. So I've based him as well. I wasn't sure on using that base, but I gave it a go, added a bit of foliage to it, and it turned out not looking too bad actually, so I quite enjoyed it. So trying to get all angles of it so you can actually see. No, I'll be honest, I'm quite impressed with how this one turned out, considering how awkward it was while fully assembled. And this has been so far the biggest project that I've done. So I mean, the next big project I'm going to be doing is the Ragnarok Spider. So I'm showing it by book because I haven't actually assembled it yet. I only got it bought for a gift not long ago. So I'm also going to be doing like a midweek filler, which is, it's only going to be a small figure just so it's not taking 2-3 weeks to upload one. So I'm going to be painting this guy here, which is the Lord Exorcist. So that should be quite fun as well. I'm going to try doing a bit of a different colour, like a bit out there colours. So if you did enjoy this video, and please leave a comment in below and like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you again for watching, and I hope it did help. Cheers.